Good evening, everyone. We'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on February 14th at 7:30 PM in the board meeting room. Thank you all for attending this evening. And how many folks do we have on Zoom, Michelle?
16 on Zoom.
Okay, great. And Julie is joining us in her COVID zone there. So I hope you're feeling better, Julie. Thanks for joining. She woke up and not feeling well. All right, good. My remarks will be brief so we can get to the public hearing and then continue the work that the board's doing. So I just want to, I think, reiterate kind of the process that we're going through here, because I know several board members called me. I got an email, I got a voicemail about this evening's meeting, about information getting out late and people not having enough time to look through the information. I respect that, but we're also have a process that we're going through here at the board table. So I think it's important to understand that. So we are still working with the superintendent's budget. And what we asked the superintendent to do after we reviewed the budget was to go back and look for some efficiencies and look for some prioritization. We have a lot of headwinds ahead of us. We will always continue to invest in and deliver the best education in the state and some of the best and one of the best education systems in the country, that we continue to get that recognition. But we have to be realistic in some of the headwinds that are facing us, and we have to continuously look and see how can we do what we do and deliver what we deliver in the best and most efficient way. So hence we asked the administration to go back and look for some efficiencies and kind of prioritize some proposals. I think we were pretty clear about really not affecting how we deliver or what we deliver to the students from an education standpoint. So that's kind of where we are in the process. I know the administration has done a lot of hard work. It's appreciated. So part this evening will be hearing from the administration on the proposals that they put forward based on what we asked them from an efficiency standpoint. And we'll go through that. And then the board process will be to ask questions around that. And I think that's important. If we need to have another meeting, we'll have another meeting to continue to hear public feedback. But, requesting that we cancel a meeting and, putting out social media posts that say there's, $1.2 million in reductions being discussed tonight. That's not the case. Again, coming here and hearing the facts and letting us go through the process. All right. From here, as we go through this process, it will eventually become the Board of Ed budget. And over the next, probably not this meeting, but if we have a special meeting and then the next meeting, we'll do our work in terms of looking at those proposals that the administration has put forward, and the board will do its work. And then the Board of Finance will do its work, and then the RTM will do its work. And in the meantime, we'll continue to work with our partners in RTM Education and RTM F&B that we've done. The whole concept of providing the board packet to the public, I think, is a good thing. I did confirm through our policy expert here, Jill, and then on my way down here from a meeting, I spoke to our town attorney. And, he applauded the fact that we get our board packages out to the public ahead of time. He said that is a courtesy that we provide our board packages before the board meeting. It's a courtesy that we provide it to the public, to our parent organizations. It's a courtesy that we provide it to the Board of Finance and the RTM. So it's nothing I want to stop doing. But with respect to this board package, there was stuff in there that, as you can see now, the administration needed time to have conversations with the staff and explain to them the process that we're going through and what was asked by the board to come back and look at efficiencies and look at prioritizing proposals. All right. So I think it's important to note, from a statutory standpoint, it's the board's responsibility to look through and work on this budget and make decisions once the superintendent's budget has been presented to us, and then work with the RTM subcommittees, the Board of Finance, and the RTM. We need public comment and we welcome public comment, but that's the process. And those are the folks that we work with on a daily basis. So we'll continue the process this evening. We're going to hear I think there's a sign up sheet, which is great. So we'll hear feedback about the budget that's been presented in terms of the superintendent budget. I will tell you that your feedback will be important based on what you've seen in terms of the board package. But again, I would say it would be good to stay and make sure you hear what the superintendent is going to speak to in terms of what he has proposed, and then listen to the questions and what the board is asking and looking at. I think that's a good way to look at it. And as I said, we'll look to see if we need an additional meeting to continue the open dialogue and make sure everyone's comfortable with the budgets that we're working on, and then we'll go through the process. So I will pause there, and Michelle, I will move it over now to public hearing.
Good evening. For any participants in person who would like to comment or to participate in the public hearing, please wait for the chair to acknowledge you and call you over to the podium.
Thank you. So does this include Zoom? No.
No.
All right, so we'll do folks in person first. Let me get my. We have Mark Sheehan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Adderley, ladies and gentlemen.
Could you make sure that the speaker is close to you? Thank you.
Any better?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Mark Sheehan. I am not a resident of Darien. I reside in Southbury, Connecticut, but I'm here because I have been asked by members of the Secretarial Union to speak on their behalf regarding their opposition to elements of the modification proposal to the FY24 budget that is here before you tonight. Specifically, they speak in opposition to the elimination of up to 4 unit positions and the resulting realignment of work. The proposed budget before you calls for further reductions in the secretarial workforce, which has already been cut to the bone from previous reductions. In 2019, the secretarial workforce for the Darien Board of Education was made of 37 full-time workers. With the proposed budget cuts here before you tonight, that number would be reduced to 30, a 19% reduction in just a few short years, with no reduction in workplace responsibilities. And now, with this budget comes the propensity of something worse, and that is the termination of productive employees through job reductions that may result in layoffs. Additionally, the proposed changes would move work exclusive to the Secretary's bargaining unit to be reclassified and become work of reconstituted paraprofessionals. Said transfer of work is prohibited without prior bargaining with the union, which has not occurred under Connecticut law. Conversely, with the elimination of unit positions, other work will be redistributed among unit members who already hold full-time equivalent positions, and again, without the presence of collective bargaining over the secondary impact of this increased work. And finally, the proposed changes will be a disruption to the operation of the district as jobs are eliminated, work is transferred, and redistributed. Even mere word of tonight's meeting has sent considerable disruption among the working group, just to know that this matter may result in additional work responsibilities while in the presence of loss of jobs.
You're at time, Mark.
Thank you. I have one more sentence. In sum, your employees ask that you reject these proposals and ask that you simply find another way. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for speaking, Mark. Sarah Messelschmidt.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Hesselsweet. I live at 15 Stanley Road. I'm a parent of a 5th grader at Holmes and an 8th grader at Middlesex. I'm also a biology teacher at Darien High School. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of all the science teachers in the Darien High School Science Department in opposition to the administration's suggestion to modify the current science secretary position to a paraprofessional position. We understand that the decision is a financial one, but the science teachers at Darien High School believe that this decision would have immediate, long-lasting detrimental impacts on teaching and learning and would be an inefficient choice to make with the budget. Historically, the science secretary position was held by someone with 2 master's degrees. This person is now a science teacher at the high school and has spent years working closely with the current science secretary. It would take multiple years to train a new person for this role, which will either reduce the amount of time teachers have to spend helping students outside of class, or will impact the quality and sophistication of lab experiences we're currently providing our students across all science course offerings. During a period of high turnover in the district, the administration should focus on retaining talent and supporting the long-standing relationships that remain in our buildings instead of reshuffling roles. Continuity is in the best interest of our teachers and our students. The current science secretary possesses a substantial degree of institutional knowledge and expertise with respect to educational practices, curricular materials, and lab protocols specific to Darien High School. Their familiarity with our practices regarding hazardous materials and sanitation has a steep learning curve and cannot be replaced with a paraprofessional. A paraprofessional by contract has over 200 fewer hours than is required of the secretary to fulfill the same annual obligations of the secretary role. It will be difficult to find someone with the level of expertise required for this position who would be willing to work for this reduced wage. The current position, as it is compensated today, is a bargain for the district. On a personal note, I will have children at Darien High School for the next 7 years, and with the reduction in department expertise that would result from the loss of the science secretary position, my children would not have the same quality science experience that has so long distinguished Darien schools. The substantial amount of time the science secretary spends helping teachers coordinate and prepare our lab experiments is vital to the preservation of a high-quality science education. Negative impacts on teaching and learning for a small budget savings is not a worthwhile exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for speaking this evening. I have Lindsay DeVito.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay DeVito. I live at 78 Fitch Avenue. I'm speaking tonight in support of leaving, not cutting American Sign Language as a world language at the high school and the proposed budget. Being the mother of 2 children with severe to profound hearing loss, I can think of countless reasons why ASL should be offered in Darien. It is inclusive, it builds empathy, it prepares our students for a world outside of Darien, it brings diversity to our course offerings, it teaches students the value of community, and it brings cultural awareness to an underrepresented population in the United States. Hearing loss is on the rise across the globe. According to the World Health Organization, over 700 million people will have disabling hearing loss by 2050. And I'm not sure if you know, but 3 out of every 1,000 babies born in the United States have some degree of hearing loss. So this leads us to a growing need for professionals for the deaf and hard of hearing. ASL interpreters, speech therapists, and audiologists, to name a few. Darien students who do not learn well auditorily or struggle with grammar, phonology, or syntax of a foreign language would benefit tremendously from ASL. It is visual and tactile. It requires movement and emotion. Wilton, Greenwich, Fairfield, Rise City Public Schools all have thriving ASL programs, and it's clearly an accessible way to give students the opportunity to pursue a world language. If I read the proposed budget correctly today, if we leave ASL in the budget, it would only add $15,000. This feels like a drop in the bucket. Dr. Klein has been advocating for ASL at the high school for several years now, and it's long overdue. And I feel that it is not an unnecessary cost. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for speaking, Lindsay. Sarah Gortel.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Gortel. I live at 22 Brushy Hill Road. I have 4 children, including 1 at DHS and 2 at the middle school. We were also at Tokenique for 11 years. I'm speaking tonight as the budget chair for CDSP. I want to start off by expressing my appreciation to the Board of Education, to you, for the time and effort you put into your positions as town volunteers. I also want to thank Dr. Adley and the administration for continuing to lead us through a most challenging year. You're navigating youth mental health challenges, security concerns, not to mention multiple years of educational and social emotional losses due to the pandemic. I also want to thank and acknowledge our teachers and staff who we appreciate and value so deeply. I'm here to speak to you tonight about the 2023-2024 budget, proposed budget. While we understand and share the desire for efficiency, we also want to ensure our students and teachers are our top priority. Cuts do not happen in a vacuum. There's concern that some of the proposed recent cuts by the administration were made under duress and may place additional burden on our already strained teachers and building administration. We look forward to hearing the board thoughts and questions regarding these proposed cuts and hope there will be another opportunity for the public to respond before the final vote. You will hear tonight from other CDSP members representing the different buildings in the district. Common themes across schools and levels will be the need for ongoing mental health and wellness support, for building substitutes, and for hiring to fill the concerning vacancies across the district that are impacting our school climate and IEP service delivery so significantly. We've also had many parents speak in favor of maintaining budget control to ensure the district can hire teachers when needed, given the close projections. There's support for the K-12 robotics program that can help continue our commitment to being a STEM leader and for the exciting introduction of ASL at the high school. We're grateful for the addition of the Director of Mental Health and are hopeful that we will not have to wait a full budget cycle to see her recommendations implemented should she support programs such as Teen Talk at the middle school, where experts say it's most effective. Additionally, there's a concern among community members engaged in volunteering time to the district's DEI goal that there is little dedicated to that effort in the proposed budget. We've heard from many parents and staff that there's a clear and immediate need to put some structure and guidance in place to support our students and teachers. Process and planning have been recurring themes this year, and I want to close by expressing a few difficulties in the process that we would like to work together to improve. It was challenging to have such important programmatic presentations given so late in the budget cycle, such as the Teen Talk and Wellness Update. Additionally, the unexpected change in process this year with the last minute release of administration proposed cuts made it challenging for the PTOs and parent community who want to have their voices heard on public record. Finally, thank you to my fellow CDSP members for their work and dedication to this
You're at
process.
time, Sarah.
Thanks, and to the board for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Sarah, for speaking. Antoinette Cowles.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Antoinette Coles and I live at 5 Hillside Court. I am one of the co-chairs of the Darien High School Parents Association. Tonight I'm speaking in support of the robotics program. Initially funded by a grant from the Darien Foundation, the program has been a great success, and we are here asking that the board give this program the support it needs to thrive. When the program began in 2021, the 2-year initiative was to serve as a launching point, integrating STEM robotics programming into the district at all our schools. STEM education is vitally important and will continue to be so in the future. Robotics gives our students valuable experiential learning and the chance to pursue a passion, just like what can be found with theater, the arts, and our sports teams. The team at DHS has garnered valuable skills such as creative thinking, collaboration, problem solving, and communication. Without a robotics program, DHS students interested in STEM will be at a disadvantage when applying to colleges and pursuing degrees as an increasing number of students are coming from schools with robotics teams and programs. Offered across the district for K-12 students, the program has been so popular that most schools hold lotteries for the coveted spots. It's clear students are interested, and it's an area we should be looking to do more with. While we understand the district robotics program comes with a big price tag due to the high cost of the equipment and competition fees, we need to look at the big picture. We can take measures to reduce the cost to the district, such as pre-buying equipment, similar to how we pre-bought athletic team uniforms in 2020, or asking students to pay participation fees and fundraise. The curricular opportunities are currently limited, so we think it's important to have a team at DHS be open to any interested student. The DHS robotics team will also serve as a culmination of the experiences from the elementary and middle schools, where younger students begin learning transferable skills like logic, teamwork, creativity, trial, error, and failure. Darien schools are known for their academic excellence, but in the subjects of STEM and engineering, we are falling behind many other districts across the country. There are amazing tech and STEM focused high schools, as well as schools that have incredible maker spaces and innovation centers within their buildings. Robotics is a great way to enrich and improve education for students across the district. STEM education is so important in our world now and will be in the future. We hope the Board of Education will not let our schools fall behind. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking this evening. Layla Buckjune.
Good evening. I'm Leela Buckjune, and I live at 12 Du Bois Street, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Darien High School Parents Association. And on behalf of the DHSPA, I would like to speak in support of several items in the proposed budget that directly impact students. After the tragedies experienced at the high school and within our community last year, we must dedicate our resources to the mental health of our students. Our students are asking us to support their mental health and provide ways to combat the stresses that they experience at DHS. The board has already acknowledged that need with the approval of the Director of Mental Health for the district, and we thank you for that. With 50 to 75 students visiting every day, the Wellness Center is an overwhelming success and clearly indicates that our students value the safe, supportive space in the building. The addition of a Wellness Center coordinator would proactively build on this success by supporting the mental health team with programming, intervention, and crisis management, and would allow the center to remain open for the entire school day, reaching a greater number of students. Additionally, we support introducing a Teen Talk professional, which will bring us in line with the majority of schools in Fairfield County already committed to the safety and health of their student communities. We believe this program is a vital means to facing mental health crises head-on. Department chairs were introduced in 2017 school year to address inconsistencies and to better align the transition from middle to high school. They devote their time and attention to students by helping teachers build consistency across content and grade level to better deliver curriculum. This proposal to require department chairs to teach one period would directly put at risk full-time positions held by other teachers in an environment where it is increasingly difficult to retain and hire qualified educators. In particular, we urge you to support rather than add more responsibilities to the special education chair, who already goes above and beyond, stepping into classrooms for staffing shortages, given the growing number of students receiving services. In addition, we are greatly concerned about the proposed replacement of the science secretary with a paraprofessional who does not have the qualifications to effectively command the responsibilities of the position. This change would have a very negative impact on student instruction. We are also concerned with the reduction of the administrative assistant position from 12 to 11 months. This proposal seems to have been made without an understanding of the complexity of this vital role. In addition, we support the proposed 0.2 FTE for American Sign Language. The opportunity to fulfill the language requirement with ASL would provide our diverse student body a means of communicating that is inclusive, a life skill that can be used in the workplace, and an important alternative for students with language-based learning differences. In today's post-pandemic environment, we request that you consider returning the $11,000 in senior parking fees back to the DHS budget so that we can pay for the many spirit-building senior activities and events that these funds once covered. Finally, we would like to request that the board revisit the 2-mile bus radius policy.
Your
2 miles.
time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Mertzi and Courtney Galligan.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Marisi, and I live at 109 Raymond Street. I have a freshman at Darien High School, a 6th grader at Middlesex, and a 3rd grader at Tokenique. I'm the co-chair of the Middlesex Parent Association along with Courtney Galligan.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Galligan. I live at 12 Homewood Lane. I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader at Middlesex and a 3rd grader and a 1st grader at Tokenique. We appreciate the opportunity to speak about the budget as it relates to the MMS community. We would like to touch on 3 things tonight: a 3rd building sub, Teen Talk at MMS, and Genius Hour. Teacher and school counselor turnover has been a big area of concern at Middlesex this year, and we believe we have had the highest turnover in the district in the past 12 months. This turnover has had a significant adverse impact on our teachers, students, and the school climate. It has also had a disproportionate adverse impact for our students with IEPs and their delivery of services. We sincerely thank our staff throughout the district who stepped up to work extra hours to try to meet the needs of our students. We also thank the board for the new teachers' contracts and hope the new teachers' contract in hopes that it will help with retention and acquisition of talented teachers. We strongly support the salary market adjustments for substitutes and making the 2 existing building substitutes 5 days per week. However, we would ask that the board consider a 3rd building substitute specifically for Middlesex. With 120 teachers and only 2 building substitutes, there's a large gap in coverage for routine absences that puts additional strain on the teachers and staff to cover the classes. On any given day, 9 teachers on average are absent at Middlesex, and this number is significantly higher during peak winter illness months. In comparison to the elementary schools, who have half the number of teachers who require a substitute and half the average daily teacher absences, it feels proportionally logical that Middlesex should have 3 building substitutes. Thank you to the Board of Education and Administration for acknowledging the mental health struggles in our community and the need for a district-wide focus by hiring the Director of Mental Health. While physical space constraints currently limit the ability to create a wellness center, the MMS staff are interested in creating a climate room in the near future. We fully support Mr. Maroney's addition of a Teen Talk counselor at Middlesex. We understand that the administration would like to wait for the recommendations of the Director of Mental Health. However, as Ms. Denise Qualley from Kids in Crisis explained, new counselors are trained in the summer and it would be difficult to insert the program in the school mid-year. We would hate to have to wait an entire budget cycle to bring in this much needed resource with proven positive outcomes in middle school across Fairfield County. Finally, while we understand the questions around the Genius Hour program introduced at Middlesex this year, we ask that it continue to be supported and given the opportunity to gain traction. The program is in the first year of a 3-year progression and is designed to allow students to develop key skills outlined in the vision of the graduate through grade level community choice-based creative projects. It is not intended to be stressful or academically driven, but an opportunity outside of the rigorous curriculum for students to explore topics of personal interest. We ask that the teaching materials for Genius Hour are not cut from the budget. In conclusion, we appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight in support of the Middlesex proposed budget. Thank you to the board for your ongoing efforts to ensure that Darien schools continue to maintain their reputation for
You're at
academic.
time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Megan Thornton.
Good evening. My name is Megan Thornton and I live at 49 Birch Road. I have a 2nd and a 3rd grader at Oxbridge. I'm one of the co-chairs at Ox, but I speak to you tonight on behalf of all 5 elementary school PTOs. These remarks were written collaboratively with input from Henley, Holmes, Ox, Royal, and Tokenique. While we recognize that Dr. Adley has taken the board's suggested cut of the 3rd building sub, we respectfully disagree with that position. For the district's youngest learners, having the appropriate staffing is of critical importance. Part of the original proposal was to eliminate interns, yet the administration is not adding them back in while keeping the building subs numbered to 2. Without interns, the math just doesn't add up. Being down to 2 people to begin with will cause even further pressure on already strained staffing resources and have cascading effects on all students. Last week at Royal, there were 5 unfilled staff absences in one day and 0 available subs. Admin had to pull from instructional aides, paraeducators, and SRBI specialists to cover these positions. Students miss necessary interventions, pushing them further behind. Why are we setting ourselves up for another year of staff scrambling to cover absences for illness, PPTs, and professional development? We also worry that teachers and staff are burning out, using their contractually guaranteed free time covering classes instead of using it for lunch and class prep. We are concerned that budget control is being cut. There are already 3 sections close to the tipping point of maximum size guidelines. Ox's 4th is 3 students away, Royal's 3rd grade is 2 students away, and Tokenique's kindergarten is 1 student away. Many schools have already come to the board to shed light on the problems in special ed. Tokenique still does not have a second full-time psychologist, and Ox had a shortage of OTs and paras in September. We understand the difficulties finding appropriate staff in today's educational environment. There is no district-wide system to keep track of missed services and proactively notify parents. Some sort of electronic log of missed services should be kept in a centralized location. It can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet maintained by each school's APs. Then parents can be kept abreast, like Kat Brunswick at Tokenique, who notified families recently of the number of missed sessions per student due to the unfilled psychologist position. Transparency breeds partnership between home and school. Another area of concern is reading instruction. Research shows us the key to remediating issues is through early intervention with a scientifically research-based curriculum. This is why we support moving away from the Teachers College Reading Writing Workshop. By changing the reading instructions for our youngest learners, the need for specialized instruction at the middle and high school levels would decrease. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention the removal of the 6th instructional aide at Ox Ridge. This makes the para to student ratio 1 to 102. All other elementary schools have a ratio no greater than 1 to 88. This is inequitable and a sure way to increase paraeducator burnout. Ox saw a 16.6% increase in students this past year. We are already budgeted for a 5th 3rd grade and a 5th 4th grade. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Laura Hagan.
Good evening. I'm Laura Hagan. I live at 504 Mansfield Avenue. I'm here on behalf of the boys swim and dive team. I have a junior who's a captain of the swim team and a freshman who is also on the Blue Wave swim team. Jenny Moles, who is another captain mom, couldn't be here tonight, so I'm speaking on her behalf of her son, who is a senior. Hello, my name is Jenny Moles, and my son is one of the captains of the Blue Wave swim and dive team. Will has been a member of the team for 4 years, and my younger son will join the team as well once he gets to Darien High School. I am firmly in favor of an increase in the amount of money allocated to interscholastic transportation. More specifically, I would staunchly support a district-wide policy to provide charter buses with bathrooms for all state competitions for all teams. Our team's trips to states and opens are often 1.5 to 2 hours away. We make it a point to tell the boys that they need to stay hydrated, which requires proximity to a bathroom. Also, in many cases since COVID, full access to a locker room has been limited, which is a catastrophe for boys putting on tech suits upon arrival. This problem is also solved by bathrooms aboard the coach bus. For 4 years, I have seen coach buses readily provided for teams at Darien High School who are participating in optional out-of-state tournaments. I'm aware that this is because the school buses are not allowed to travel over state lines. And yet the fact is that the money has been found to cover this expense for the benefit of other teams. Boys Swim and Dive is asking the bare minimum and requesting that the coach buses be provided for our league championship meets. We do hope that you will recognize our team's basic needs. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you for speaking, Laura. Michelle, anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Miss Caroline Comfort. You are
Caroline,
unmuted and
Can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Caroline Comfort and I live at 48 Norotan Avenue. I'm one of the co-presidents of Darien Advocates for Education of the Gifted, DAEG. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our community of families and for all of your work you have all done to prepare this proposed budget. As a group, we are not in support of cutting the 0.2 FTE at Darien High School. This cut would essentially eliminate the Achievers program as an elective offered to freshmen. This course offering provides a much needed opportunity for a small group of students who have few other outlets or opportunities for pursuing this type of advanced coursework until they have fulfilled minimum requirements at DHS. This elective has provided a community of like-minded peers who have worked together often since elementary school the chance to pursue a topic of interest and fulfill their needs as students. Additionally, as we have said in prior years, when Achievers finds itself on the cut list, we strongly believe that curriculum decisions such as changing the IDEA program should not be made during budget cuts, but as a part of a deeper conversation on how this cut impacts the program as a whole. We see that in the cut memo, it mentions that Achievers would potentially be moved to the middle school. A big change like this should deserve a more nuanced conversation. This also would be more likely not in effect next year, which leaves the incoming 9th graders not able to participate at all. Darien prides itself on the consistent delivery of high quality education, but we can't do that without the necessary people to make it happen. And we can't keep asking the amazing staff we have to do more and more without considerable risk. Why does Darien have such a high rate of absenteeism, and why have we been losing so many veteran teachers in the last year? It all comes with a price, and we are not in support of cutting FTEs from this budget. Again, thank you for allowing us to speak tonight and your continued work to strike the right balance to meet all the needs of Darien students. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for speaking. Anyone else, Michelle?
Lenny B., you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear us, Lenny B? Lenny B?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Lenny Blumenthal. I live at 17 Fairmead Road. My daughter goes to Middlesex and my son goes to Tokenique. My family moved to Darien 9.5 years ago, and the reason we moved to Darien was for the schools. If it wasn't for the schools, if that wasn't the issue, we could have moved to Norwalk or Stamford. We could have bought a bigger house, nicer house for less money. So to my mind, Darien is a lovely town, but the real reason people move here is because of the reputation of the schools. Other than the schools, there are no sports, there's no music, theaters, museums. While there's some nice restaurants in town, no one's thinking of Darien as a culinary center. The value of Darien is the schools, and the value of the homes in Darien are the schools. I think it's very important that we don't look at the budget in terms of what we can cut, but how we can do better in the schools, how we can make the schools even better than they are now. The proposed $116 million budget versus last year's 110 is in line with inflation rate in the area. And if you take out the security extra added expense, which is a new expense, it's actually under inflation rate. I also understand that there's open positions that have not been filled, which is creating a surplus, which I'm sure could help. I know in the COVID year, there was also a great surplus. The budget should create an atmosphere that would bring teachers in to Darien, not make the teachers want to leave. We are seeing by the open positions that we do not have enough qualified teachers looking to take jobs in Darien. Darien has what I would say is comparatively low taxes for nice towns in the New York metro area that are convenient to New York City. I lived in Bergen County. I had a home, 1/5 the value of my home now in Darien, and I paid the equal amount of taxes I'm paying to Darien now. As a taxpayer, I would say add teachers, add support staff, raise my taxes. The value of my home, the value of living in Darien is the school system. The town is
time, Lenny.
okay. The town is building up a lot of real estate stock. There's going to be more people. This means more kids in schools. We need to build up the schools. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for speaking this evening.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, we'll circle back. Anyone in the audience? We've covered everyone. All right, good. The only, I must make a comment because I'm somewhat disturbed by the CDSP comment of it looking like we put the administration under duress. I think words matter. And our local newspapers are always looking for headlines. And I think the facts should be pretty clear. So I want to make sure, Dr. Adley and the administration, you're not feeling that you're doing this under any duress.
I'm not, no.
I think it's a collaborative approach that we started here. We have not changed up the process. We've asked the administration to kind of look at the budget and come back to us with some proposals. In my 9 years on the board, superintendents have done that in the past. But I think using words like that don't help the conversation around the budget. All right, they're dangerous words. All right, this is a very collaborative approach. It's a really good working board. It's a phenomenal administration. And while these are tough decisions, it's tough economic times and there's tough contracts and there's tough economic headwinds approaching us. So if we don't look at this stuff and have the conversation around it, it just makes it more and more difficult to continue to invest in education for our students. So I'll pause there. We will move on now to further review of the 2023-2024 superintendent's proposed budget and further discussion on proposed modifications that the board asked the administration to bring in terms of efficiencies and priorities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for those who have come to speak in person and to those that are online. In regards to the duress question, Mr. Chairman, I will say that certainly it wasn't under duress. This is a charge that could be given to a superintendent to make reductions where he or she feels is necessary, or given a charge to come back to the board given the charge that had been given. However, I will say that I've lost some sleep over it. It's not something I take lightly by any means. There are people who lose positions in this challenge. And we have got even some staff in this room right here. I don't do that lightly by any means. That's a very difficult choice to have to make. I will say that these are things that I don't want to do. If that counts as under duress, I don't know, but it certainly just don't want to do these things. But I'm coming back in good faith the way the board had asked to bring back recommended reductions. While they are hard, most of them, right? We've tried to address that charge as best we can under the circumstances, and they're not easy circumstances, just the context within which we're living, and then jobs and employment and so on and so forth. But I bring before you tonight these reductions. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll just go through. There are two memorandums that I sent to the Board of Education that were in tonight's packet. I'm not going to deliberate much on them, but with your understanding, if you'd let me speak to those two quickly, and then we can certainly.
Good, because when I came home, he was not down here, so I was wondering where he was.
Then we could.
But what was he doing? No, after he finished, what did he go? Julie, can you hear us?
We can't.
We
hear
can't
you.
hear you.
Julie, your mute is on. There you go.
Sorry. I can hear you now. You went quiet for a second there.
Please continue, Dr. Adley. I apologize.
Thank you to the members of the cabinet and also the administration district-wide for their contributions to this discourse. So I just pointed out in the first memo sent to the board just a couple of things, and I won't belabor them a little bit. I'll mention them so the public who are here and those who are online can hear them. The reduction of the 0.6 PE teacher, we have come back a couple of years for this. I wouldn't keep coming back if I didn't think it was so important around the size of the health classes, the context of what's being taught in those health classes, and the environment that needs to be made. The ASL program, we're asking the board to reconsider that. We feel that that's an important program to keep in the budget for the reasons that we have articulated. The wellness coordinator, we certainly heard the board's discussion and questions around that, and we heard the presentation last week. I would ask the board to consider that is a grant, and as a little bit of a compromise in terms of approach to it, I would ask the board to consider leave that grant, don't touch the grant for anything else, and whenever we bring Dr. Dad on board when Alicia arrives, we'll ask Alicia to do an evaluation of the wellness center
and to come back, and if it's her recommendation that we could proceed forward, then we would utilize the grant at that particular time. If the board wants to be involved in that, it can be, in the sense of come back here and explain and report back. I would ask us to consider leaving that as an option on the table for the wellness center. And I think it does what the board wants in terms of waiting until the respective professional gets on board. I will say the same thing for Team Talk at the middle school. I would ask till we wait till Dr. Dad comes on board, and if she comes on board and says that we need the Team Talk, I would ask that we would just come back to the board at that particular time to either request an appropriation or to take it out of the operating budget. We can talk about how that process would actually work. The department chairs, I'm not going to deliberate this too longer. They are integral and, in my opinion, critical to the work that gets done in the district. There are other implications that I've outlined to the board in this particular memo that are complex too. I do not suggest discussing that during the budget process. If the board desires to have that discussion, I would suggest doing it outside of the budget process. Genius R, I would just ask it to give this program a chance. It's $16,000. It hits all kids. We haven't gone through the whole process yet, even to be evaluated. I would ask to give it a fighting chance. It's actually the only one enrichment program that touches all kids that I know of, that I can think of across the district. So I'd ask it just for the board for their consideration and keeping that program. The cellos, as we continue to build the arts, it's important that we continue to advocate for opportunities for students. And yeah, we can't take cellos home in the bus and so on and so forth. And we're looking for 2 cellos for each of the elementary schools here. So I'd ask that we would keep that in, given the incremental improvements that we're trying to do to the arts program. The ELP secretary, there has been discussions there. We have reviewed that and we feel as if our recommendation should stand on that. We feel as if we've got coverage for that ELP program. The Team Talk I just spoke about. So I'll just transition now into the actual reductions that we shared with the board. For the community's reference, the process of sharing that is no different for this week as it has been for other weeks, and the posting is the same. So we're recommending that we would purchase another 2 vans. And this would offset our costs of out of district transportation. So we've got 4. This would increase the vans to 6. So you can see the savings that results from those purchases. That would be in, we'd have to do those in the capital. The arts coordinator release time, it's a 0.4. We're suggesting that would be reduced by 0.2. Yes, that arts coordinator does work from K through 12. The secretarial support, I can sort of describe it sort of all at once, just as opposed to going through all of them. We looked at this, and clearly these were some difficult choices that we had to make. We have a reduction here at central services of 1 secretary. We have a reduction of a secretary at the high school for athletics. We have a reduction at the middle school administrative assistant, not in the main office. We also have an increase of, a decrease of a 12-month to 11th month. And then we have the middle school that we've heard this evening, some comments on where we're reducing a secretarial position for the science, what we would say that they call it the science secretary. And we would replace that with a paraprofessional. Yes, the paraprofessional will do some of the task of what the secretary is doing, but there are some jobs that the secretary is doing, the tasks of that you wouldn't describe as secretarial in nature. So it sort of crosses too. And I know that's a hard thing for given the time the person has been there and the expertise that they had. These aren't choices that I would like to make, but you'll see some principal secretaries. It's just what they're called and where they're placed. They're actually different positions. They're not principal positions, principal secretaries that are being eliminated. The technology efficiency, has been a very, very difficult decision to make. I think we have a lot of things in place, from one-to-one computing throughout the school district, which during COVID, for all the decisions that were made prior to me being here, actually. The board made some good choices in having a lot of technology in place, and that served the district well through COVID. The Director of Technology, I believe, has led the district in an exemplary fashion. We have one-to-one at the high school. We've one-to-one. Sorry, we've got bring your own device at the high school. We've one-to-one throughout the district. We've got libraries reimagined and up and in actually good shape and influence the design of the buildings. This is a matter now of going in and coaching and helping teachers coach on the ground, and we would be replacing that administrative position with a teacher position who would actually be a coach K through 12. I would say this, if the board were to, for the want of a better way, take this position, I would just reserve this, that I would have to see how one person up and down the system in a teaching role, no teaching responsibilities, can exercise and can implement some of the teaching instructional processes and strategies K through 12. So if you do sort of decide to add that to the cut list, I'm just giving a wee precursor that I wouldn't exclude me coming back at some time, perhaps upon evaluation of what we've actually done. So, but that eliminates an administrative position and puts in a teaching position in its place. The athletic restructuring is what I've discussed in terms of the position for the secretary at the athletic director would go away in this particular scenario. Some of the responsibilities would go to the assistant athletic director, but other secretarial responsibilities would be disseminated, and that would be the case for a lot of the responsibilities from here at central office to throughout the district, whatever those responsibilities are. Yes, it's not unusual that different bargaining units and different employees, unfortunately, in these times, have to do more and assume more and do things differently. And some of those responsibilities, yes, would be disseminated. That covers sort of the athletic restructuring, and it covers the central services restructuring. Paraprofessional support. I'm suggesting here that we would go to 5 to 4 paraprofessionals at Oxbridge. I've talked to, we're talking about 9 students, and there are guidelines. These are not mandated things that we have to, ratios that we have to adhere to. There are guidelines. The principal feels that he can manage that. Now, I don't want to put the principal between a rock and a hard place here, okay? But I certainly wouldn't do it, or would certainly reconsider it if it didn't feel that could be handled at school. So that's for another 9 students. So again, that reduces that paraprofessional. You could say in some ways it goes to the athletic department, but it's not really. We're really reducing it, and then we're adding to replace the secretary. Budget controls. Given the number that we're trying to get at, or given the task that was before to get at, it seems reasonable to me that we bring back and go, okay, but as long as the board knows what the process would be, we will do the same thing as set in August, late August, the sections. The board will see those, we'll set those. If they are okay, they're okay. If they're not okay, then we're going to have to go through a procedure, which will be much the same procedure if after they're set, and I feel as if things go over, or this isn't anything new. This is the board always approves additional FTEs. I would have to come back to the table, either when we're setting them, or if for some reason something happened between we set the class sizes and had to come back thereafter. I think the board would want me to come back, and I will come back and ask, look, such and such as class section is just tipped too much here, right? And we need to have a section. What we would invariably do, we would carry that into the operating budget for a period of time, because the year has just started and we're not forecasting a deficit at this particular point. And we would see at the board's pleasure as to when you would want to completely revisit that, but ultimately at some point along the line, if it were running a deficit because of the budget control, and we weren't able to make that up to either through transfers or otherwise would have to go for an appropriation. But invariably you would run that, let that run for a little bit in the operating budget, if there are transfers that can be made along the way, fine. If not, then it would end up having to go for an appropriation at some point. So again, I'm just clarifying what I believe that the process should be under the budget control. The DHS Teachers of the Gifted, I think someone just mentioned the gifted program, and that's not the way to do it. I understand that the board put on the table 0.2, but I'll just say that this, I feel in full disclosure, this is not the way I would like to report this out. We have been going through a process, the board has actually with the administration on a review of talented and gifted. And so we're scheduled to actually have that report come before the board in February. And in that report, I just want in full disclosure, there is the recommendation to do exactly what this is doing, which is to take the Achiever program out of the high school, It will be implemented. I think it won't be an Achievers program, but it'll be a culminating event. But it's going to have to work at the middle school schedule is going to have to change through that process. So I'm just sharing with the board in full disclosure, that is what the recommendation would be. Now, whether the board would want to do that recommendation or otherwise, but I've taken that recommendation and implemented it at this particular time, since I'm going to bring it before the board in February. I would respect any parent who would say, well, I thought we were going to hear the report first. Just given the challenge that I have before me, I feel as if I have to at least disclose that. Now, what the board would like to do with that, that's up for consideration. Robotics, I understand, and the idea of equity around robotics and so on. Look, this impacts a lot of kids, right? And there's a lot of students who have been extremely engaged in this. Some students who aren't engaged in other activities. The whole STEM field and so on and so forth has been talked about. Here we're suggesting that equipment, which is really the iPads that we do without, the field trips and the professional development, which are fees to get in to the actual competitions, that we would offset those. I would ask us not to offset the complete equipment because it is it's expensive in that regard. And I would ask us just to offset the robotics program by these amounts, which is really the iPads, the field trips, in the sense of if students have to go to competitions and so on, and entry fees. Building substitutes, while yes, we advocated for 3. But we still think getting 2 5 days a week and then calibrating the payment is, if we can't get to 3, we'd certainly like to get that. So again, all of these things would have been in the original budget if we really wanted to do them. The revenues, certainly the board came up with some revenues. We're suggesting that we take those revenues. Again, all these obviously are board decisions. The professional development around the student information system, we have to look at that in a thoughtful way over a period of time, and we'll find a way to do it. If it's bringing people here or otherwise, then that's what we'll do. For curriculum research and development, we have very little under R&D. This is really R&D right here. And it's used every year to pilot new programs or to investigate new processes and programs out there, whether they be curricular or whether it be software or otherwise. This essentially takes that off the table. And if we have to do that, and if it comes through that, it may have to come through a superintendent transfer or otherwise. The textbooks under curriculum, there was a significant change in that this year. And under that, we have decided to level fund the library books. And for the units of writing, which are K through 5, that doesn't impact the K through 3 reading program, that we feel that this can be deferred for 1 year, for another year. There were various dues and memberships that we cut back on. And then the consultant services we reduced under curriculum. We've had a very successful mathematics professional development throughout the year that was well received by teachers. We're going to continue to do that this year, upcoming year. And that was our Singapore consultant, who is world renowned, and he's going to spend some time here, and that will replace some of the teachers college mathematics coaching that has been done. So that's again, these are some decisions that I don't want to make all these decisions, but when I have to, these are the recommendations. The capital budget, we talked about 2 Suburbans as part of the picture to offset out of district transportation. I think I'm asking the board to hopefully consider continuing the discussion about the auditorium project. The Durgan, the secretaries, I just put in here where we were. You can see the secretarials that we had and the ratio, and then if we do what we're suggesting doing here, you'll see that we'll go to pretty much last in the district in terms of secretaries to student ratios. So those are the board, the administration's recommendations to make the reduction, which comes down to 3.77.
Thank you, Dr. Adling. I appreciate that. And thank you for your comments early on. I think the board will echo those comments that these are not easy decisions. They're not easy conversations. If you go back to the charge of the board, it's hiring the superintendent, it's board policy, school policy, and it's also the budget. So we don't take any of this lightly ourselves. I know these 8 folks that are here, it's not easy conversations, but it is our role as elected officials to really look at the budget. Always look to invest in our education and our students, and always look for efficiencies and make sure we have the right prioritizations in place. So I appreciate that. With that, I think we will move to any questions from a board perspective on the memo that talks about the health teachers, ASL wellness coordinator. Mr. Sini.
Hey, dude, before I do that, would you mind if I just kind of crunch some numbers real quickly in terms of why we're at where we're at in terms of, so just remind folks, and thank you, Dr. Adley, for giving us a thoughtful, analytical, and your team, of course, prioritization of some items in the budget that we're looking to, reach a certain number after hearing some feedback. I think this process is a lot better than us. I think somebody used the words willy-nilly in the past, picking out budget items, not being professionals in the education. So I realize it's tough. It's, as Duke said, not easy for us, but when I go back and crunch the numbers, I mean, everybody knows that your proposed budget increase is 4.94%. Now, if we hypothetically ran through our surplus, which is going through this year, and took $1 million off, that would fall to 4%. It's not a low number by any means. And I realize what's driving it. And some of that was some of the security initiatives and the mental health initiatives that we took. But if you also adjust for that, if you normalize for the current surplus and still take out $1 million from this proposed budget, we're at a 4.62% increase over last year, if I did my numbers correctly. There's only been 2 times in the budget packet that you gave us that we've approached that number. One was in the wake of a special education crisis, which this town was left reeling, and we were forced to spend a lot of catch-up money, if you will, and restructuring money. And the second time in COVID, but ironically, through the grant process, we gave about $1.5 million back. But that number is not even a real number. So, barring those 2 anomalies, this is the largest proposed budget that we've ever seen in the last since 2014 or something like that. And I'm sure if I go back to my 22 years, I'm not going to find a number too close to this number. So there's good reasons for it, but we're forced as elected officials, not only serving the parent community, but all of the taxpayers. I hear, and I did come to this town before I had kids, and I put 2 through the district, and we have one last one in the high school. It's a great place to educate kids, but it's also an awesome place I want to remain after my 3rd graduates. So there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why people stay, and one of it's also a responsible fiscal budget. So as stewards of the school budget, I just wanted to point that out. So the question goes to Rich. I guess, can you walk through the payback arithmetic if we were to pursue the 2 additional Suburbans? I mean, I think it was great analytical work, but I think it's important that we kind of highlight, it's going to be an upfront capital expense. But I think the payback is, we're talking like within 2 years. Is that remotely close?
So we'll break even in a year.
Okay.
Just about a little over a year. The Suburbans typically cost around $60,000 each, which is a little bit more than they have in the past. It's car inflation. as a factor, but we do save between $45,000 and $55,000 a year. One of the things that we're seeing in transportation, primarily in out-of-district transportation, because they can't find drivers either, the escalation rates are 5, 6, 7, 8% annually. So you can make up that money within a year, maybe 15 months, because you're not having that 8% annual escalation. You can also flex the drivers a little bit more. And so one of the things we've been able to do is use those suburban drivers, not only for out-of-district transportation, but ELP students, Fitch students, for example. And so you see small savings there as well. So we have 4 drivers currently, and it's proven to be a very effective model. If the board does go with adding the 2, we would have to go to P&Z for approval. I don't think it will be an issue, and speak to Jeremy, but you clearly would get your money back, and the program has run very well and would continue to run well.
Rich, just to add to that while John's on that point, what's your forecast of the cost of the busing contract next year?
So for out of districts, they've told us a minimum of 5% increase.
Okay.
So what was built into the budget in the out of district line item was that 5% rate increase.
And then in renegotiating a 3-year contract, or what type of increases are you seeing? You've talked a little bit about the health insurance increases. What about the potential increases to a bus contract?
So our home to school, our non out of district, but our in district special ed costs, which is per student, that contract ends at the end of next school year. Districts have seen anywhere from 10 to 20% annual increases. And that's a large part because people can't find drivers. And so in order to find drivers, bus companies are offering sign-on bonuses, higher pay. And when they do that, they have to pass that off onto the consumer. We're the consumer. And so we will typically end up having to eat that cost. One of the disadvantages we have, and we spoke about it on Super Saturday, is we don't have a bus depot. So the last time the district did put out to bid the bus contract, they got 1 bid. And so typically what happens is we get whoever Stanford has, because that's where the bus depot is. If we look at other districts throughout Fairfield County, Newtown is a really good example. They have so few drivers, they have to park the bus, send a message out to parents saying, you got to bring your kid to school because we can't find drivers. New Milford, while not in Fairfield County, they've been stuck with the same situation where they've had essentially parked buses because they can't find drivers to pick up their kids. And the parents get a text message saying, sorry, but you got to bring your kids to school. Part of that has also been impacted because of COVID. So most bus drivers lost their job when schools shut down. We were able to retain our drivers during COVID because we renegotiated the bus contract, which allowed us to get a flat rate renewal in the future. So our bus drivers didn't really lose their job. And so, while we're not fully staffed, we're about 3 drivers short. Those are really the spare drivers. And so the only time we really have a concern is if we have more than 3 drivers who are out sick for any given reason. So we've been in a much better place.
Thanks, Rich.
Can I just wait?
Yes, John.
Just on a different topic, and this will be my last one. Harkening back to COVID, we ran a 2 million plus deficit well into the following spring semester. So I'm pretty confident that if we're faced with, a number of sections that amount to the 226,000, we can find ways to fund it. And then if we have to go through the same special appropriation process that we went through to cover it. I mean, budget control is simply a reserve fund, gives us flexibility. It's nice, but if you look at the history, we actually never really, I think there's been one instance that we spent it and we've been using it for other sources, not just elementary sections. So let's leave it at that.
Thanks, John. Dennis.
Yeah, going back to the Suburbans, Rich. If I recall, last time we purchased Suburbans, it took a long time to get said Suburbans. So is there any concern about us switching to this and then not being able to realize this? If we don't get the Suburbans by August or September, then we'll have to negotiate a contract with the bus service system, I would assume, or do we just, can that be a temporary solution?
So it could be temporary. You can essentially go what's called like month to month, and you pay by the month. Last year when we got a Suburban, we sent somebody out to Pennsylvania to pick up the Suburban so we could get it quicker. So if we have to send somebody to Pennsylvania again, send somebody to Pennsylvania to get the car.
Okay, just asking. Thank you.
Tara.
Just quick. You mentioned we have to go to P&Z because of the Suburbans. I was just curious about that.
So when the town approved the ability to have Suburbans parked here at 35 Leroy, they only gave the approval for 4.
Okay.
So we would have to go to amend that to have more than 4.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Jill.
Yes, Alan or whomever, can you clarify the statement about the deferring the K-5 units of writing? Can you just give a little more color about what that means, please?
So let's, Jill, good question, but let's, in order to kind of go through this and make sure we cover it all. Let's go back to the original memo. I'll go around the board. Any further comments or questions around reduction of the proposed FTE for the health teacher at the high school? Do you want to have any further conversation on that? Do we want to have any further conversation around ASL? Remind me to look for Julie. Yes,
Is there
Sarah.
any way to know, if there's students that cannot take French, Spanish, Mandarin, whatever for, if there's a IEP reason or what, is there a way to capture how many children ASL would help? Or would opt into that? I don't know how do you know how you know that?
I have a part B to the response. You can do the part A.
It would be a guess.
Yeah.
There'd be no way to really know without really polling students to find out. So I wouldn't guess at doing that. I also think it might be a language that will be used by students who are already taking a second language in high school. So it wouldn't be limited to students coming into ninth grade. So it'd be hard to really predict that.
Right.
And the part B is we would need. We couldn't have more than 50% of the students having an IEP in the class because then we would need it to be a co-taught class.
Right.
So we wouldn't want to base it on that.
Good. We will go on to item 3, wellness coordinator. Any further conversations on this or what Dr. Adley has proposed? I think we covered department chairs.
Duke, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I?
No, go ahead, Julie. I was looking for your hand.
Thank you. I'm just having trouble following. Are we going through?
So we're on the first memo. Which
Okay.
has
Okay, so going through.
8 points on it. So
Sorry,
just wanna
I
have
was trying to
some
follow
kind
on the
of
spreadsheet. My bad.
logical process.
Sorry,
Yep.
I didn't follow.
No, that's all right. We'll get back. We're back on it. So.
Thank you.
All right, we will, any further board conversation or comment on item 5, Genius Hour?
I had a quick comment.
Yes, sure, Julie, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that we as a board approved this program last year. So since it's only run a few sessions so far, I feel like we owe it a little more time. That's all.
Thanks, Julie. We'll move on to item 6, cellos. Further conversation on cellos. Ellen, you clarified in here that are you actually reducing the cost? You found a vendor to provide them at $500. Is there any change to the budget on that, or is that's just
That's what was in.
that's what was in there? I just want to make sure. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Questions or comments? Item 7, ELP secretary. Anything additional there over and above what Dr. Adley explained? Good. Item 8, team talk at MMS. Any further conversation there, board comment? Sure, Katie.
Thank you. Dr. Adley, I just wanted to follow up on your comments that you made about that. Just asking, was the point that you were making when Dr. Dad comes on and evaluates that we wouldn't necessarily have to wait until the next budget season to add it, and that we would be able to align with more of the schedule that is necessary in order to get the person in place and trained appropriately? I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking the board
Okay.
to consider. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. Just
Okay.
if we could do it in that same way as I'm asking the board to consider it at the high school.
Okay, thank you. If I can, just one last comment on that is just to say that I would hope that the administration would make the middle school a priority when Dr. Dad comes on. I'm supportive of adding this, and I would just say that every day, hearing really, really troubling things about students of that age group. And, it's a difficult age group anyway. So I would just hope that we are keeping our attention and focus on them and not letting it end at just the high school.
Yeah, yes, I'm Katie, I appreciate your comments, and I think you can probably safely say that there is a focus there now, and there's going to continue to be a focus, and perhaps even a heightened focus on it.
Thanks, Katie. We'll move on to the second memo. Administration recommendations for budget modifications. Number one, I think we've covered transportation, but any additional questions on transportation? Move on to item 2, art coordinator release time. Sarah.
Can I just get some clarification about what this actually means day to day? Like, what are we losing by this reduction of 0.2 and how will that affect? I just don't want to make sure, I just want to make sure that our children are not directly affected by this reduction.
This is there's another, the technology has a 0.2 release time. We have it different because they are secondary, right? That's middle school and high school. This is K through 12. So this is the only other position, department head positions that has a release time of 0.4. So it's a 0.2, and the 0.2 will, the 0.4 allows the art coordinator to go up and down the system to visit classrooms, coordinate budget, coordinate curriculum, discussions with teachers, informal classroom observations. It doesn't count as, it doesn't evaluate the teachers, but to do all those things. And if you want to say anything else, Christopher, that.
So just make so everyone understands, just give a quick description of release time, exactly what it means in terms of the day and the schedule.
Sure.
So Jacqueline Samus is the person who holds this position right now. She is a teacher at the high school, and she teaches the equivalent of 3 classes. And most teachers teach the equivalent of 5 classes. That's full-time 1.0. So she teaches 0.6, and the 0.4 of her job is the release time as the department coordinator across the system. So the specific thing that I would say is lost is her ability to visit schools with frequency and provide feedback for teachers. The other pieces like the budget and managing materials in the department and correspondence, I think that's less affected, but she certainly will not be as available because she's lost 20% of the time available to be present in the other buildings.
Can I get further into the weeds and just, so like how many times a week is she in a particular school and how many, like how much less?
I'd have to talk to her because I don't want
Yeah,
to
I'm just
speculate.
curious if,
Mhm.
if
So
she's gonna be
she's
there
in-
once a month versus once a week, like that's a significant difference. I'm just trying to understand what
I
the
can find out more. for you.
difference is.
So it changes her role in terms of she's out there coaching and talking to the teachers.
Yes.
She's not interacting with the students.
Yes, because she'd be picking up another course.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, can you clarify that last thing? She's picking up another course.
She'd be picking up another course, which means that there's a 0.2 elimination of another person's position.
Thank you.
Katie.
So how does that work? Where is the efficiency found? Where is the savings?
The savings is 0.2 of a full-time teacher salary.
So where does that come from?
It depends. So right now there happens to be a vacancy. There's a substitute at Middlesex right now. So when that position posts, we would post it as a 0.8 art position, which poses a challenge because it's not a full-time job.
Right. So that's still something that we think is a good idea.
I think it's a manageable idea. But this is
John.
Just to clarify, so this is the only 0.4 release time throughout the district?
It's the only 0.4. There really are only 2 positions that have release for the department coordinator. The other is Greg Darren. He's 612. Jacqueline's is 0.4 because she's K-12. And so that's why the additional release time is there to correspond to the grade levels she provides oversight and support.
Okay, and then who would pick up, you said there's some other, so the 0.2 would just be visiting time and oversight time. Who would pick that up?
Building administrators and myself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris.
Katie.
Sorry, with going from a 0.4 to a 0.2, she would no longer be K-12. She would also move to 612. That's where the consistency would come in.
No, it would remain K-12.
That seems hard to understand how that would work.
Part of that rationale is there isn't a K-5 engineering program for there to be. So Greg is the 612 tech ed. There isn't a K-5 tech ed program.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yes.
And additionally. For 0.2, it's really going from the middle school and the high school. But this 0.4 actually covers 7 buildings. So not just, an additional 6 grade levels, but an additional 5 facilities to travel to as well.
Correct. That's true.
Are there also any secretarial implications that might affect the art coordinator with any of the reductions? Is it potential that they would also lose support staff?
Not that comes to my attention, but all support staff, all support staff supports our staff and supports our kids one way or the other. So
so that could be.
I can't see it not being tangentially impacting that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just want to clarify. I know you said it. So are you basically saying this, you're proposing putting in a 0.8 at the middle school?
We can't, that has to be a 1.0, so there would
Right.
have to be some shifting of staff.
I see.
Because the 0.8 would exist at the high school.
I see. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, secondary secretarial support. These are RCs 1, RC 3, and RC 25. Any further conversation? Comments? Julie.
Thank you. Excuse me. I would love to understand in general, we have some information on what our ratios are, student to secretaries across the district. And with this change, it looks like that changes considerably. And we go from being kind of average with our student to secretary ratio to being considerably higher than any other school in DIRG A. How do we feel about that? And further, what is our student to secretary ratio like at the middle school and the high school? I have it for the elementary schools, but I don't have an appreciation of that. And I ask because in addition to the prescribed duties of the secretaries, we know that there are also plenty of other things that secretaries fill in and do, covering classes, helping students, dealing with parents, and so on and so forth. So just trying to get a read on how we are designing a system that can actually support all the things that need to be supported.
So this is, Julie, I know Richard will give you the ratios there. Again, just to clarify, the bursars and the principals, these are not those positions, just where they are labeled in our particular budget. That being said, let me make it clear. Our secretaries, our secretarial staff are some of the hardest working people. They're on the front lines. They're often the person that reaches out and you don't know what they're doing, but they care for kids. They get them through the day, they get staff through the day, they do their jobs and then some, and they have a lot going on, right? And this is a difficult choice to make this, but it's one that I think we have to do. Well, it's down here as a recommendation, and I feel as if we have to do in terms of trying to meet at least the task that I was given to meet the financial challenge that was before me for that. This is a high school. This is the high school science, and this is also the middle school secretarial staff, not from the main office. There are none really from the main office except for that high school bursar one that's named bursar, but it's going from 12 to 11 months. It's not really impacting in that regard. So they're difficult decisions. I don't want to minimize those, but I certainly wouldn't also put them on if I think we can't somehow manage that. But, that being said, I just can't recall the.
So at the middle school, the average number of secretaries in the DIRG is 4. Obviously, not all the middle schools have the enrollment that we have. So the best comparison really is New Canaan. New Canaan's middle school has 6 secretaries and just under 1,300 students. So that's a ratio of 1 to 213. Currently, we have 6. We're proposing to go to 5 with projected enrollment. That would bring us to 1 to 213. So essentially in line with what our highest enrolled peer is in the DIRG. Where we see the biggest discrepancy in secretarial support across the DIRG is the high school. For example, if we look at New Canaan has 9.5 secretaries. The high school only has 7. So that's really where you see that gap where we did that comparison, where we were currently middle of the road, and then we're kind of going to the highest in the DIRG. It's not so much the middle school, that kind of stays in line with the rest of the DERG, and the elementary schools by and large are relatively comparable to the DERG. But the high school has been and would continue to be a higher ratio compared to the rest of the DERG. And then in terms of the science position, every district in the DERG has somebody who's a non-certified staff who supports science. So the position in itself is clearly important. We are the only district in the DERG that has a secretary associated to science. So New Canaan, Weston, Wilton, Westport, and Ridgefield all have a science para. If you go across the DERG, it's clearly a subject area. They can't not be supported by some type of non-certified staff, but we are the only one that has a secretary as opposed to a para. But again, the high school is the one area where we definitely don't stack up in terms of secretarial support.
Sarah.
Can you talk, we heard in public comment, there was some, and maybe I just misunderstood the public comment, but something about changing the secretary to a para, is there a union issue with that? And can you talk to that?
Well, so I want to be clear with all due respect to Mr. Sheehan that we will not move any work that is solely the work of the secretarial bargaining unit to another bargaining unit. Setting up science labs is not secretarial only. The teachers do it at the middle school. So the person that's in that position is lovely and she works her heart out. Do I think we can do it with a para? Yes. And as long as I have the mic, I have one more thing. The reduction of the 12-month bursar administrative assistant to 11 months. Mrs. Dunn has spoken to that person and they have agreed outside of even sort of this, that position is manageable in 11 months. So if you want to put secretaries back at the high school, that's fine, but the bursar administrative assistant to 11 months is not needed.
The replacement from a paraprofessional, while challenging and understanding and disappointing for some people, let alone the person herself. We couldn't do this. I would ask the board not to do this and not like replace by a person. We can't do it without a person, because I think it's fair to say not only science teachers get use out of the secretary who's there at the moment, other departments do as well. And it just would be critical to have a person there. So it's sort of like goes together type thing.
You good, Julie?
Yes, I guess, thank you for coming back to me. It does sound like some of our secretarial staff, maybe more so than others, is definitely student facing. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as we assess these recommendations, which I appreciate them and I appreciate the effort. I want to be as efficient and responsible as we possibly can be in budgeting, but not to the point where we could potentially be doing things that would damage teaching and learning or student experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Dennis.
Can we, excuse me, have a job description and responsibilities for these positions? Because I'm still unsure of exactly what they do, and having a little more color to that could help. Please, thank you.
Any other questions around 3, secondary secretarial support? We'll move over to 4, technology efficiency. Any further questions or comments on item 4? Julie.
Thank you. Am I muted? No. So here, I believe what we're talking about is what we.
Can you just make sure you're speaking at the mic, Julie?
Yes, I'm sorry.
We hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
I think what we're talking about here is kind of going back to the model that we had before 5 years ago, if that's fair to say. I just wanted to point out, and I understand that we're saying that for now, this looks like it meets our needs, but in general, I think technology is something that innovates and changes at sort of a rapid pace. So I don't want to be short-sighted and say that we can change our model because we're in a management and sustaining situation when that maybe shouldn't be the case long-term. So I just want to flag that or open it for conversation.
Julie, I appreciate that. I would also say that I think there's questions from the board about possibly reducing equipment and so on and technology and recycle a replacement schedule and so on and so forth. I would just say that I would ask that we don't do that because while we applaud and laud what we do in technology, like we don't buy the top of the line stuff. We just don't. Okay. And if there's an area that's we're always on about and trying to monitor and trying to improve, and the two directors have done a great job, but it's a work in progress. And I would just ask is in the spirit of what Julie says is if we could try to maintain that because this model, we can't dismantle things and go backwards. And I'm also saying here, I think, that we need this other position to go with it. I can't do without a position. It would also be reorganized, and in that position would go under the director of technology in the department.
Questions?
Duke, I'll just make
Sure.
One comment I get from constituents all the time, and some of the analytics Mr. Brown asked for is, just the growth in administrative staff. And I know we've made some restructurings, and I voted for some over the past, but I'm just calling out a concern I often hear, the growth in administrators. So, I think the community is looking for some restructuring. This might fit in that mold.
Thanks, John. Jill?
Alan, I didn't understand that last thing. You said that this would require some restructuring, that this person would go under.
Well, just under supervision is the one it would go under the director of technology.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Good. We'll move on to number 5, athletic restructuring. Comments, questions? John?
I guess if you could talk through the restructuring of this, I think Rich or somebody made it, well, I think it's in the memo, the comment was made that we're the only district that has an AD, assistant AD, and a secretary. So maybe talk about, by eliminating the secretary position and giving what role are we going to give the assistant AD, which has to be covered? It sounds like the entire role, but I'm interested to understand that.
So we have been able to cover the secretarial position for the athletic department in the past. There's a lot of purchasing that goes on. Many secretaries throughout the district do purchasing, so we'll farm that out to other people, potentially even to secretaries down here. Transportation, the assistant athletic director may be involved in transportation, but we have a very strong transportation coordinator right now. So I think what he'll be doing is more the scheduling, the interfacing with parents, being just a presence, at games. He'll come in earlier and help to make sure that everything is set up on time and ready to go.
So more of a presence, more hours.
Yes, and we'll certainly do some of the things that the current secretary did, but those things are not things that belong to the secretarial bargaining unit. They're things that other people in the district can take over.
Thanks for the clarity.
Good. Move on to number 6, central services restructuring.
So in the same way, Mr. Chairman, at number 4, just given the difficult choices we had to make around the district, I thought it was incumbent upon us to look internally here at central services, first of all, both for staff and certified staff and non-certified staff. And this is another difficult choice.
Questions, comments? We'll move on to item 7, paraprofessional support. Questions, comments, Sarah?
I'm wary of this one just because it's directly pulling from students and assisting students. And we've heard a lot from Oxbridge parents and that they're struggling. I don't know if that's too strong a word, but that there's issues with the amount of kids versus the amount of paras over there now. So I would just love to understand. I guess I just need to know that this is not going to hurt teaching and learning in any significant way of the Oxford students.
Well, the instructional paraprofessionals do a superb job, so I'm not going to say that they don't impact our children. Of course they do. This is one of the ones that is most closest. So it's going from 5 to 4. All the rest of the schools have 4 other than Royal. Talking to the principal, we think we can manage it. It's about 9 more students that we're talking about. We think that's manageable. It's not as if we're in some cases, even on class sizes, but teachers, we sometimes make over 1 or 2 or otherwise. This is something we think we can manage. It's not a practice I want to relatively, it's not to embrace that full practice moving forward. But in this case, I thought it was.
Where do we fall with the other DIRGs?
For instructional aids?
We have less than Westport and New Canaan. We have significantly more than Richfield. And we're kind of in line with Wilton.
So I'm, in those numbers, I didn't count the campus monitors where everybody has one.
Rich, a little off topic, but just Sarah's comment about students and all. I heard or saw somewhere, someone commented on a student getting off a bus and walking into Darien Commons in Norotan Heights. So I know you're looking to track that. So do we have any enrollment from any of our new developments?
None significantly, we can certainly check again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Jill.
The memo begins, we're recommending moving away from the 1 to 89 student ratio. Does that mean just for this decision, or is this a number you're looking at in the bigger picture?
Certainly for this position, but I don't know that it's a hard and fast number, but it's a guideline and we'll continue to honor it as a guideline at this particular.
But you feel that it's a guideline you are interested in, or it's a guideline you're evaluating in terms of its overall value?
I think it has served the district well. If there's a different, if there's a different model to consider, I would bring that back. But at this point, it's still a guideline that serves the district well. And if we had to actually go outside of it for some reason, even to add another one in for a particular reason, that would sway it the other way. I would still consider doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Katie.
Thank you. I don't think I have any questions about this, but I do feel compelled to say that I have grave concerns. This sounds to me to be in direct opposition from what we're hearing from both parents and from board members in terms of support staff. This seems to make what is already a challenging situation with staffing more so. Furthermore, increasing a ratio. I'm not in support of this.
Any other questions or comments? Julie.
Thank you. Just,
You're muted, Julie.
sorry. How far away from that ratio are we moving? What are we looking at?
I think we're that's 1 to 102 or thereabouts.
Okay. I have to, yeah, I share concerns. Thank you.
Dennis.
I had the same question. So, but you mentioned 9 students. So I'm
Yes.
a little confused. So if I do the math, adding 9 students to 89 becomes 91.25. How do we get to 102?
Well, you're adding it to the entire student body.
I'm sorry, could you?
You say you're adding that number to the entire student body
Yeah,
to take the ratio.
Okay.
it's. Never mind.
Okay. Okay. That kind of comes up to the next section on recommended budget reductions. Any questions or comments with respect to budget control? Sarah.
I'm just want to say for the record that class size is one of the things that we value most in this district. And if we get rid of budget control, particularly in conjunction with our last conversation, I think this board has to really make a commitment that if there is a section that tips, that we are okay going back and allowing that break to happen and finding the funding for that, because that is one of the hallmarks of our education. I just want to make sure that everybody is on board with this if this cut does go through.
I don't honestly think there's any other way to do it.
Our
I
class
don't-
size
I-
policy would still be in place. So.
Yeah,
we
doesn't
don't
change
honor-
anything.
I just want, I'm on the record, everyone's good with that.
Yeah, just from a
Mr. Sal.
process standpoint, we still have to approve a transfer out of budget control when we do that. So
Yep, understood.
there's,
One question on that process, were we to move into the model where we didn't have budget control built into the budget and we did find ourselves breaking sections? There was discussion about how the transfer the appropriation piece, were we to need it, would not come at the time and it would come later. So my question is, when we face that point in time, would the appropriation still be labeled as being related to section breaking? Or would it be labeled as from whatever we had pulled from in order to fund
Well, we still have the track record of what was transferred or what wasn't transferred or what's an outstanding balance, what's gone into the a deficit that our records are very.
I'm not questioning your records. I guess the point that I'm making is that if we were to move into this model, I would just want to ensure that the narrative was very clear, even as we got further away from it, were it to be several months later, that this was really a result of us valuing class sizes and needing to break a section.
Yeah. I think it would be go through how we report it from a budget standpoint. It would be very clear as to what the dollars are and what they're needed for versus whatever the surplus must be. So
You can remind me at the finance committee to keep the narrative straight.
Jill.
And just to be clear, I would far prefer to cut potential positions and potentially fill them later than to do anything to known positions. So to me, with the commitment that we will honor our class size policy, I would just rather cut a reserve.
I would just mention that sometimes, Mr. Seeley mentioned it earlier, that there's an occasion where this would go toward maybe not just class size, but it may be a paraprofessional or teaching assistant instructionally or for special services or otherwise.
Any other questions or comments? We'll move on to item 2, Darien High School Teachers of the Gifted. Sarah.
Just making the comment that this is going to come in front of the curriculum committee next Thursday. So before our meeting on the 14th, there will be a chance for everybody to hear what the recommendations are from the administration.
Okay.
And just so the board is aware, it wasn't met, the intent of the recommendations moving forward would have been for the following year.
Okay.
Right. So it wasn't always planned to be behind schedule.
Okay. Item 3, robotics. Questions or comments on robotics?
Question.
Dennis.
So with robotics, we're asking for 100% of the costs of professional development, competition. Well, but mostly competition and field trips. So, excuse me. I know for our athletic teams, we do 70-30 split. What do we do for our other clubs that travel? Are they 100% supported or not?
Yeah, they generally are for travel. Yes, definitely.
So like for the only one.
For the middle schools.
So like Quiz Bowl or DECA, it's all parent contributions, fees, things like that. Nothing comes from, excuse me, from the Board of Ed except the advisor stipends.
So this would be similar to, so that would be as.
So it would be somewhat similar. The only difference would be in this proposal, the cost of the materials, which are really the robots, would be funded by the board, but the competition fees, the travel would be parent funded, donation funded, et cetera.
Okay, and then my second question is are these equipment, is this a one-time or an annual purchase that we should expect year on year? Or is it to get the program up and running and then we should see a decrease in following year?
You're probably going to see this as an annual cost for equipment.
Thank you.
John.
Duke, I just want to clarify something. The comparison, I think in public comment, was made between robotics and sports. I think sports is only funded by the district grades 9 through 12, not K through, or was robotics K through 12, right? Yeah. So just to highlight that. Thanks.
So I think Dennis's question is good. The equipment line here are for iPads.
Correct.
All right. But I think to Dennis's question, on an annual basis, is there equipment you purchase for the program for them to build?
Yes.
So in the materials account, there's a budget of $30,000. It's robots, it's metals, it's tires, it's things like that. Those would be annual recurring expenses.
Good understanding. Tara.
I just wanted to know if that number is just high school or if it is the K-12 number that we're looking at right now.
The equipment number?
K-12.
K-12. Good question. Katie.
Just a question, maybe outside of this specific budget conversation, has there been conversation about bringing robotics into curriculum as opposed to as a club?
Well, we have brought it into curriculum up at the high school in terms of the robotics course, elective course that students can take. So it did actually influence that decision. And as we move forward, we've infused some of it into the elementary libraries, and part of that curriculum. So I think you'll find it, as it expands, that it will continue to have influence.
I think that was the original conversation.
Yeah,
Dr. Adley rolled it out to us.
No, I understand that. Thank you. I guess the point that I was trying to make was that it seems that there is, we've had a lot of engagement from public comment, and it seems that there's a lot of support from students and interest in this. But part of the issue at the board table is that this is a club and consistency of how we fund clubs. And so I was just wondering if it might be something to look into growing more of the curriculum and more of the places that it's built into the actual school programming as a way of supporting it, as opposed to a club.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4. Go ahead, Jill.
Could you just review again what's in the professional development line? I know you did, and I remember what you said, but I just want to hear it again, please.
Well, what we took out of there are the fees,
So it's competition fees, and it's like memberships to be able to join an organization. But it's primarily the fee associated with being in a competition.
Thank you.
We move on to item 4, building substitutes. Dennis.
Yeah, so just a question, I guess. So when reducing, we heard a public comment, the question specifically to Middlesex, and reducing that creates a ratio disparity versus other schools, I guess, at the middle, at having a building substitute, since you're now dealing with one large school versus 5 smaller schools. And I specifically talked to Middlesex because for me, DHS is building subs I'm not overly concerned about. The students should be old enough to manage on their own, but middle school students are different. And how do you feel about that specific thing?
So we're not reducing. This was the ad.
But it's a reduction in the ratio from where it was to what it is being proposed. And
Well,
we're comfortable with that ratio, I guess is my question.
I guess go back to making sure we're all on the same page. How many substitutes are currently at Middlesex? 2. Okay.
But middle school and high school teachers can cover classes. They get paid the $32 an hour. So even though the building substitute ratio looks worse for the middle and high school, elementary can't. So that's why we're comfortable with 2.
Thank you for the clarification.
And the 5 days helps a lot.
The 5 days and the increase in the daily rate. Okay. Any other board questions or comments? Julie.
Thank you. And I would imagine if we end up needing more subs than what we have available, which of course we will, but we would just end up seeing that cost captured in the other substitute line, right? Not the building substitutes.
Correct. You'd see it in the daily sub line.
Okay, so obviously we'll keep an eye on that. And if we decide to go forward without adding the additional building subs, we'll see how that works out for us in the long run.
Thanks, Julie. We'll move on to 5, revenue. Questions or comments on the changes to fee charge on field rentals? Rich, just maybe high level, how we are now comparison to our other districts?
So not everybody has the same fee structure as us. Not everybody charges like an hourly rate and a per participant fee. So the closest comparison is Newtown. They have the same structure where it's an hourly rate and a participation fee. So there's just 31, which is our recommendation, and the original budget was 31. We do have a huge demand for the use of the fields in the community. And obviously it's the difference between Lower Fairfield County and Northern Fairfield County. So 35 isn't really an unreasonable area. If we look at our field rentals compared to our peers, whether it's Westport or Weston or Ridgefield or Greenwich, we are far ahead of those communities in terms of the revenue we collect.
There's no recommendations in the costs or fees that we charge for the custodial services and security and anything like that.
So that was in the budget, and we did recommend a 5% increase, but no change associated with that other than
from this exercise. Okay, good. Mr. C.
So Rich, just a little further on that. So how we apply the fees different. You said the only comp in Newtown. How is New Canaan doing it, and kind of what might be competitors of local field rentals?
So a lot of it is like an hourly usage. So if you use the field, let's say for 2 hours, you're getting billed a rate for 2 hours. Whereas we charge, if you have, 10 participants, you're paying that $35 in this case to the 10. If you have 100 participants, you're paying 35 times 100 as an example. So the bigger sports obviously pay more.
Understood. So I guess the question is, do we feel like we're leaving money on the table by not?
No, we're collecting far more. than
Okay,
we,
that's where I'm going. Thank you.
You got them where you wanted to go.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, Rich. We'll move on to item 6, professional development. This was associated with the potential replacement of Aspen, right?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments around that? Good. We'll move on to item 7, curriculum research and development. Questions or comments around that? Dennis? Sarah? Sarah first.
Just noting in the binder, in our original binder, it says that this is where funding would come for anything that Dr. Dad would need coming in. And I know we're talking about not wanting to maintain contingency accounts, but my educated guess is that she's going to need some funding when she comes in. Is there, I mean, short of transferring money from line to line, are there other funds for her baked in here somewhere?
Go ahead.
I'd say nothing's baked in, but we would have to transfer some funds into that account to support it.
Okay.
But things like professional development can be supported because they are aligned to goals that we already have, for sure.
And can you, like, what was this used for this year? And I know we always use this line, so give us examples about what
So
it's used for.
this year at our last curriculum committee meeting, we actually talked about the world language department piloting IXL in 3rd grade. So that was in there. When the district piloted Haggerty, when we were doing more to address the science of reading, it came from there because that came later in the year. When we were using Seesaw, that was not budgeted, and that supported virtual learning. So those are the types of things.
So I guess my concern is not only for Dr. Dad, but also this K-2 reading, which is still pretty nebulous and unclear what's happening with that. I'm just a little wary of taking this off, because there potentially is a need for it.
Any other further comments or questions?
Yep.
Dennis?
So to Mrs. Parent's point on this, and I think similar to her point on budget control, is that I am reluctant to remove this, but willing to, if the administration is willing to come to us, if there is a program that needs funding, to fund said program for research and development. I don't want to have a stagnant district that does not want to advance.
Thanks, Dennis.
Certainly appreciate that comment.
We'll move on to Katie, sure.
I would just take that a step further and say that I actually think that we do have things that are worthy of looking at. I myself requested for additional looking into literacy and reading. But I also think writing is something that is not something that has been addressed at all. We have been supplementing with Haggerty and with foundations. Writing has not. My understanding is that Teachers College has not yet released their new units of study for writing. We don't know what are in them. And writing instruction seems to have maybe gone by the wayside a bit. So I would like to see not just this remain in the budget, but for there to be a focused effort into looking at some specific issues.
Thanks, Katie. Jill?
Did you already have a plan for this account that you could share?
No, there's the point of the account is things come up after this process. And that's how we address them.
Thank you.
We'll move on to textbooks. Questions, comments? I guess, Alan, the one thing that you had mentioned that this would come back next year. So what would come back next year? The 64,000, the 74,000?
The units of study.
So the 64,000 would come back next year. Okay. Jill?
So just asking that same question, but from a curricular perspective, can you speak to what this means?
So Ms. Loveland is spot on. The units of study aren't out yet.
Can you Start that over again.
As Katie had mentioned, the units of study aren't published. So what happened last year, we purchased the reading units and the reading units were delayed. And so our implementation of the new reading units was therefore delayed. If we could predict the future, it looks like the same thing's going to happen again. And so we can defer the expense because it's likely we wouldn't get them until halfway through next year anyway. And we wouldn't be able to implement with fidelity. So it makes sense. I'm sorry, my voice is going.
No, thank you. Just
Thank you.
good. Thank you. We'll move on to dues, fees and memberships, item 9. Questions, comments? We'll move on to item 10, consultant services. Questions, comments? Sarah?
Alan, can you just clarify what you said at the beginning when you went through this? So this would not be bringing the Singapore math specialist back in?
No, it is bringing
It
a
is bringing
Singapore.
them, But not doing other things.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Because I know he was very well received from what I understand.
We're bringing them in for a longer focus period of time.
Anything else on item 10, consultant services? Okay. I think we'll just go over quickly to make sure we're all aligned with capital. Anything additional on the 2 suburban purchase and the savings? Thank you, Rich. And then any further discussion on moving the auditorium project? I think that's going to go to the facilities committee in short order.
It's on our agenda for Thursday.
Okay, good. Sorry. Overall, any other questions or comments around this? Mr. Zini?
Can you just walk through well, I guess we should have a discussion whether or not we need another meeting first,
Yeah.
but also the process, which
Yeah.
we will follow.
Yep, no, absolutely. No, thank you. Again, thank you to the administration. Thank you to public comment for continuing to inform us about your thoughts. Thank you to the administration. I know not a difficult task. It's not a difficult task for the board either, but it is part of our role and responsibilities. So not an easy task. What did I say? Okay, thank you. It's like Catholic school grammar. Yeah. So a sense of the board, we have a board meeting in 2 weeks. That board meeting would again open up with any additional questions or comments around the budget. And then we would go to do the board's work on the superintendent's budget and go through again these budget modifications that have been presented before us and anything else that individual board members want to bring to the process. So that would happen at the next scheduled board meeting. Is there any census of having a meeting between now and that board meeting?
Can I just ask a question first?
Sure, Sarah.
So going in historically, we've gone through everything on the ag cut list line by line by line. That is still our idea.
We will go RC by RC.
And we will do it not just what the administration is proposing, but every single thing.
We
that's
will
on the
go
list.
RC by RC and what the administration has presented to here to us, we will have that conversation at that RC.
Right, okay.
Good. No, thanks for the question. Good.
So to your question, this was great this evening. Thanks for being so well prepared for us. I don't have any additional questions around the memo, what's been proposed. So as a board discussion, I don't need anything. We do have public comment before we
Yes.
go through RC by RC.
Yes, and public comment after. It's a regular board meeting.
We will vote though do we vote on the final budget that same meeting? After we go
14,
RC by RC? Yeah, so, I mean, you do have a public comment opportunity before that meeting.
Good. We can always, through the course of the next week or so, if we need to rehear and we come to a consensus that we want to add a special meeting, that's always an option.
Email works
Email works, so.
too by, public comment as well. We read them.
Good. Good. All right. Thank you to folks on Zoom and folks in the audience. I think overall a really good conversation. Again, thank you to the administration for following up on our guidance. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Mr. Sini, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank